Safety Workshop. My name is Ida, and I am one of the hosts for the evening. Just a reminder to everyone, we will be starting at a few minutes. So there is a chat, and it would be nice for everyone introducing themselves.
Can anyone go first?
If you want to introduce yourself while you're here, you're more than welcome.
It's Shawnette.
Hello. How are you doing, Shawnette?
I'm good, thanks.
Great. Awesome. We have Sharon joining us in the chat. Hello, Sharon.
I also wanted to welcome everyone. I'm the co-facilitator tonight. My name's Lee Richmond. So for those of you who are coming on, I'm just going to reiterate to just go into the chat and introduce yourself. You can also unmute, or if you're just calling in, you can also just speak up and introduce yourself. We have a few minutes before we get started. Thanks, everyone. Welcome. We're super excited to have you tonight.
Maybe I'll quickly ask, we do have one person joining us over the phone. The person who's at 647-718-3129. Would you be open to just pressing *6 to unmute and then introducing yourself?
Hi, Mercedes, it's Allison. I just moved to the area. I've done some volunteer in the past. I'm part of the community health working group. I'm just interested in learning some more tools to increase my capacity, so I'm looking forward to. Was there anything else you were looking for in the introductions, Mercedes?
No, that's it. Thanks, Allison. Just getting used to everyone who's on the call.
And Mercedes, actually, I'm going to try dial in also for the visual. I'm just going to use the phone for the audio. I'm just on an old computer.
Awesome. That sounds great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So we're going to get started in a couple of minutes. Yeah, very shortly. So get your glass of water, get ready. I think Ida is going to start us off with a few, like how to use Zoom, just for those people who might be new to it. She's going to do a little bit of a run through. Yeah, we're going to get started shortly. Just waiting for everybody to get into the chat. Hi, Anthony. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Hi, Shawnette. Welcome to you too. Welcome to Rachel and Sharon. Is it Erlina? Welcome, Erlina. Apple, Temi, welcome, and Allison. I think we spoke with you.
Okay, Miss Ida, as long as you're ready, we'll get started.
Okay, I'm ready. Conflict resolution. Mute and unmute yourself. Please remember to mute if you are not speaking. Take yourself on and off camera. Take yourself off camera if your Wi-Fi unstable. In the participant tab, you can raise and lower your hand. You can also name yourself, which is very helpful during group discussion. In the chat tab, you can post comment and questions that we will raise during discussion. We will also post link here as well. In your meeting control, click interpretations. Click the language that you would like to hear. Tibetan, optional. To hear the interpreted language only, click mute originally audio. We would like to acknowledge that we are gathering and learning on the territories of the Wendat and Peton First Nation, the Seneca and the Mississauga of the Credit First Nation. This land is subject to the Two-Row Wampum Belt Treaty and the dish with one spoon. Wampum Belt Treaty, a peace treaty between the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee to agree to share the resource of the land as long as the dish never runs dry. Over time, indigenous nation, people, and settlers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of mutual respect and solidarity. As treaty people, we are committed to upholding those values in our organizing. So I myself, I just want to say how grateful I am for the indigenous people to know that they have made a way for me. I'm from the Caribbean and I came to this land and I am so happy and I'm so blessed to know that they have gone through so much things for my happiness. So tonight I just want to say thank you, Indigenous, for what you have done for me. One diva, one mic.
Sorry guys, we got these slides actually a little split up, but this is actually Lee's going to be coming in here, Miss Ida, but thank you so much.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay, it's okay.
Okay. I turn over to Lee.
Thank you, Ida. So this is our community agreement. We create this to just say what we are working towards and why we're doing these. Our group has been really dedicated to creating an inclusive environment for everybody. We obviously don't tolerate harassment of any form. And we want you to know if you are witnessing or experiencing harassment, that you can just inform a member of our organizing team. We're all marked by a star before our name in the video chat. And we also offer a breakout peer support space with an active listener. And today our active listener is going to be Beryl Ann. Beryl Ann, can you just come on quickly, introduce yourself and tell people a little bit about what you're going to do tonight for the role?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Beryl Ann. Like Lee said, I'll be the active listener tonight. And what the active listener does, is there an echo? Okay. Sorry. What the active listener does is, if, let's say somebody's triggered in the space, in this workshop, about something that is said or done, they could just send a message to me, and I'll relay that message to Mercedes to put us in a breakout room so we could, have a discussion to go over the issue that happened.
Thanks, Beryl-Ann. Great.
welcome,
So
Lee.
they can get you in the chat, they can direct message you, or however they can actually say something to the group if they prefer.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Awesome. Sounds good. Okay. So our guidelines are simple. One Devo, one mic. That means one person's going to speak at a time. Take space, but also make space for other people to speak, and also thinking about your power and privilege at the same time when you're taking space. Oops, ouch is again about respecting other people, and if you're feeling at all put out by anything, or if anything makes you upset, you can just write oops, ouch, and that is a note for Beryl-Ann and for everyone that's facilitating this, that something has been hurtful, which is really important to us because we want to know if there's anything that comes up that people could get upset about, or anything that creates conflict, obviously. So we have that as a little note, and you can also speak to Beryl-Ann about that, but please also let us know as facilitators. We're going to try to watch the time for everyone, but be mindful of other people's time. And this is my favorite one. No one knows everything, but together we know a lot. So that's like the community power of knowledge. And also together we do a lot, the community power of getting stuff done as well. Awareness of power and privilege, I think I touched on, and obviously patience and respect. Please have patience and respect for everyone. At the bottom, I want you to note that the session is being recorded, but if there's something personal you want to bring up, or a conflict of any type that you don't want shared, then all you do is you let our technical team know, who's Mercedes, and I think she can stop the recording temporarily, or for particular persons that don't want to be on camera. Okay, so that's also an option. So just let us know what would be respectful to you, is basically how this works. Yeah, thanks everyone. I think I do the agenda. Okay, so we did the welcome, we did the overview of Zoom. Thanks, Ida. We want to do the overview of Parkdale Community Safety Workshops. That's next. And then we're going to do the learning session with Kaydeen. And then we're going to do a question and answer, although there might be some question and answer intermittently in the chat in this one, because it's a bit of a participation workshop, which is super fun. And then 7:50 or 10 to 8, we're going to do next steps. Hopefully we'll be on time, and we will get you going on to your evening.
The Parkdale Community Safety Workshop series is being offered in partnership between Parkdale Women Leadership Group and Mutual Aid Parkdale. The Parkdale Women Leadership Group is a collective of racialized women from Parkdale who are bound together to take action for human rights and justice. We were brought together through Parkdale Leadership Training Service to organize in our community. We were created harm reduction zine and a peer support space called the Parkdale Wellness drop in. We aim to enlighten the people's mind through education and empowerment. Together, we are building the tools, resource, and strategies to empower people's mind, address trauma in our community, and start to process of healing.
So the mutual aid Parkdale map, which we call it for short, works closely, especially now for the community safety workshops. We work really closely with the women's leadership group. And we're also a neighborhood group. We're basically practicing solidarity in the times of this pandemic. We started right when this pandemic started, and we started reaching out to our neighbors to see like what they would need, giving them groceries, medicine, and care. We started trying to build trust and relationships with them so that we would know what they need and be able to give them what they need without judgment. So we really try to just be open to anything that people need. The Community Safety Committee formed in response to the acts of harassment in our neighborhood as well. There were growing calls to build alternatives to policing because we had several persons, most especially women, being targeted in our neighborhood, and we wanted to feel safer. So in our regular meetings, we discuss ideas for how we can keep each other safe, create walk safe programs, or create rapid response teams. We talk about different ways that we can defend tenants if they're getting evicted, or if their landlords are trying to evict them because of the pandemic. We talk about any strategies around conflict, basically, that is created because of the pandemic or not. And also mental health issues, etc., that are ongoing issues, not just in Parkdale, but everywhere. So we're just trying to create safer spaces through our neighborhood.
With the second wave of COVID-19 and the sustained movements for racial justice and defunding the police, we have been hearing growing calls from community members to skill up and offer new forms of care and support in moments of crisis that do not rely on the police. Tonight, conflict resolution workshop will talk about what happens during conflict and explore 23 communication approaches to help handle conflict when it arises.
So for our conflict resolution workshop tonight, we have Kaydeen Bankasingh. Is it pronounced Bankasingh, Kaydeen, your last name?
Bankasingh.
Bankasingh. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
She is from St. Stephen's Community House, where she works, and she also wanted me to say to you that she's also a community worker in her own neighborhood in North York. I know that she is a conflict resolution specialist at St. Stephen's. I'm not exactly sure what her title is though, but this is specifically her expertise. So we're really excited to have you, Kaydeen. This is the point where you basically take over and lead us through your awesome workshop.
Oh, thank you so much, Lee and Ida. Mercedes, Barreland, thank you so much. And to the Parkdale Women's Leadership Group and the Parkdale People's Economy and the Mutual Aid group as well for inviting me to be here to join you all tonight. So my name is Kaydeen Bankasingh, and I am a conflict resolution associate, an associate with St. Stephen's Community House that provides like a vast array of services across kind of like, you know, the downtown part of the city and up into North York where I live as well. And I think I've been doing this for now just about 3 years, right? But really, how did I get into conflict resolution? I live and work in a neighborhood in North York that's called Lawrence Heights, right? And Lawrence Heights, if you're familiar with Regent Park, that's been going under major redevelopment, our community is also going to be under revitalization or redevelopment. So some of those conversations have been had no Mercedes and other things. But more importantly, I think just working in community and like having to be there for your neighbors, you know, be a person that they go to, that you support, also be this voice that really speaks up and advocates for what your community needs in other spaces. You kind of realize that, hey, conflict is this thing that I've got to do, that I've got to understand, that I've got to be able to work with, because it's like this part of our relationships, right? So in fact, doing community work has really been like, oh, there's this need, I think, in myself to have to understand conflict and figure out how to like even learn a few ways to approach it so that I didn't feel so overwhelmed and anxious about having to deal with it when confronted. Like losing sleep, how many of us have experienced that, right? So it's a real part of the work that we do. And so it's been actually really fantastic to have the opportunity to say, hey, there are these things that are kind of hard, but really not that hard to do, that actually give us some space and some, you know, abilities and confidence more than anything else to start to handle conflict when it shows up. So I'm actually really excited to be here with all of you this evening. And I'm even more honored that I get the opportunity to be a part of like a series of fantastic speakers and presenters that you have been inviting to share knowledge and experiences during this time. So I'm actually really, really excited for it. So conflict resolution for neighborhood groups, just the title, but really I just said 23 techniques. We're gonna probably work on 2, maybe 3, you know, in the time that we have actually available to us. But more importantly, we're gonna really kind of spend some time, and I'm gonna try to share with you some ideas about conflict, right? Like, let's think a little bit about conflict and what's happening when we find ourselves in it. And then we'll move into, well, here are some suggestions or tools or techniques that you can try out, you know, or use when you find in certain situations. And then we'll apply those kind of in our group to some scenarios, right? Let's kind of think about, okay, what technique would we use, or techniques would we use and apply to a couple of sample scenarios that the Women's Leadership Group has provided for us. I also have to say that generally this conversation around conflict resolution is one that's really interactive. Like, we spend a lot of time asking questions and discussing and sharing our reflections. Like, okay, think about ourselves. What would you do? How would you handle it, as a part of how we do this conversation? So I'm really going to also invite you to use the chat. I know we're all getting comfortable with Zoom. So like some questions I may ask there, our group isn't like 40 people. So we should be able to like unmute and comment as well. There won't be time for everybody to comment, but I invite you to use the chat. You know, if there's a question or a comment or an idea that comes to mind, when I ask a question, type it there. Single words, like a key word, like mad, angry, you know, it's okay. Put it in the chat. It's relevant as well, right? So, you know, I'm really inviting you to, as things come to mind, to share them with the group and put them in the chat. And I'm also hoping that we can do that in our introductions as well. I know we kind of had folks introduce their names, but I may ask you a couple of other questions and invite you to share your answers in the chat as well. Okay. So our time together is going to be a little bit of this. We're going to do a bit of a conflict brainstorm, and I'll ask you, what is conflict? And we'll share together on that. I'll present you with an hour being the St. Stephen's view of conflict. But it's a little bit of a manifesto, if you will, right? Like, this is how we see conflict. And because we view conflict in this way, this is also how we approach, how we approach dealing with conflict. So we'll talk about a few different approaches, but we're really going to be focused on the interest-based approach to conflict, to resolving conflict. And interest here is really about feelings, needs, and values. So we'll share some words around what these things are and how, in fact, they become a part of how we resolve conflict. Lastly, we kind of really focus on 3 approaches, and those approaches are CLAIM, which is an acronym for something more when we get to it, as well as active listening and how we raise our concerns. And I've got another acronym for you there as well, and that one's called PIE. So we want to raise our concerns, and we're gonna give someone PIE there. And then we'll apply those to a couple of scenarios pending time. So I've kind of got 3 that were shared, incorporated into our time together, but pending, how the conversation goes, we'll either get to all 3 or we'll have to do fewer than that. All right, so here we go. Introduction. So this is the part where I'm going to invite you to, in the chat, if you will, or if a couple of you, if any of the women's leadership group members are interested and would like, or, comfortable enough to unmute and just share, like, what's your name, of course, how long have you lived in Parkdale, and why are you interested in conflict resolution? Like, what kind of brings you here to this today? Right. And again, it could be, any thoughts that you have around why this, this topic of conflict resolution is something that you're like, yeah, I'm interested in learning more about. All right. So we can use the chat. We can also, I'll give a couple of minutes. Feel free to unmute yourself. And share if you'd like to say how long you've lived or worked or, served your community and what kind of brings you to the conversation around conflict resolution today. Let's see. All right. 2 people having disagreements. Yes, thank you.
Hello?
Hi.
Yeah, this is Nadia. I've been,
Nadia.
well, currently I'm with my mom in Parkdale, but I have a place in Regent Park.
Mm-hmm.
But I live here and I grew up here. My mom been in Parkdale for over 40 something years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So when I think about conflict, is like what I said in the chat, and on other things with conflict, there's also conflict of interest too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So
And
people having disagreements, and you're saying 2 people having different interests?
yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Were you going to offer another comment too, or another thought?
Not and also if I don't know what you call it, if somebody, and like, so supposing you that person and you like didn't apologize to you, how do you accept that?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
I wanted to ask that question.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, so also feeling like, hey, there may have, you have an expectation or a hope that somebody's gonna, apologize for something you felt wronged by, and that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I want to ask too. Like, how can you accept that?
Okay, we'll come to that one as well. We'll talk about that one a little more. So really thinking about our own expectations, and wants, and what we're hoping we're going to get from other people. What happens if we have a bit of a need, our own needs, and our own interests that aren't met? How do we feel? And how does that also contribute to conflict?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so Lee's been in the community for over 10 years. Hi, Lee. And, you know, conflict is when there's an escalation of differences, right? So we've got difference of opinions, right? Having different interests and needs, right? So there's a number of differences as well. Allison's been volunteering since 2018. And interest in conflict resolution is really about improving communication skills and our capacity to interact more successfully with the landlords, other tenants, or in our group work with other volunteers, residents, and the public. Thank you so much. So that's really, to me, it's like how we communicate, and how is the way that we communicate also supporting the types of relationships we have, right? So it's kind of like interacting, but really the interactions are about the ongoing relationships or not ongoing relationships you have, like your landlord, right? Who's got a bit of power in a lot of ways over how your life and your living space is. But that's an ongoing relationship with that person for as long as you live in that building or they work there, right? So how do you manage that? As well as the relationship with your neighbors, right? As well as the relationships with your neighbors and other people that are in close spaces that you work with as well. Thank you very much. So a lot of what Allison has said is about relationships, I think. At least that's what I'm hearing, right? Sharon's been in the community for over 15 years and is a second year community worker student, right? So working in community and having conflict skills are really important as well. Even just being able to understand, all right, or have some approaches. Okay, what do I do if I find myself in some kind of really challenging interaction or conversation? Hi, Selena. Selena's also been living and working in the community for over 10 years. And thinking about, okay, this is another way to build skills or keep building skills, right? To support your community work and a stronger future for all. Thank you so much, right? So much of our desire to want to be here in this conversation and thinking about conflict resolution is like being able to better support our community, right? Being able to show up and be present more consistently for community, really preserving relationships. And all of that makes me think about, like, what does it mean to actually be healthy and whole in our community, right? It's about living amongst others, being with them, and also being able to really have healthy ongoing relationships. Thank you very much. Let's say, would anybody else like to offer anything else before we move on?
Hi.
Hi, who's
Shawnette
speaking?
here.
Hi,
Shawnette.
Shawnette. Hi.
Conflict. I'm interested because I have kids, so it's like I want to know how to, I could build my skills and how to deal with their conflicts, and also with my, as well as my partner, just to learn. And then the job I do as well, I also want to know how to help deal with conflicts and stuff like that as well.
Perfect. Thank you,
I've been
Shawnette.
living in Parkdale for about 10 years.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Shauna. And I was saying before that you and my sister have the same name. So, and it's spelled exactly the same. So that's really
Awesome.
cool. Nice to meet you. But I think you touched on some really important things, because conflict is not only just about like work, right? It's not only just about work or in those groups that we volunteer in. We're also really talking about our families now, right? We're talking about our closest relationships as well, right? So it kind of extends into all of these different spaces and realms. It's about all different types of relationships and interactions, right? So conflict is something that we are like interested in for so many reasons, because it is almost in every space, right? Every space and potential relationship that we will have. All right, there was another comment in the chat as well. right? So there's also now like, one of the last comments in the chat is just like, yeah, being able to be present for people as well. What that means, what does managing expectations are when we're leaders, community leaders, and volunteering, and like managing our own, you know, personal lives and supporting others, and kind of doing all of that for free often. Often for free, and doing it because it's coming from, you know, a place in our hearts as well. How do we deal with conflicts then, right? So I want to say that we take this approach to conflict because it is something that is kind of ever present in various ways. We appreciate when we have really healthy interactions where we, with others around us, spaces where we can be open, we can share, we can work together, where we can respect the differences, as so many people kind of mentioned earlier, right? But we also kind of acknowledge that conflict shows up sometimes when we don't expect it. It shows up very loudly, you know, and so even though we are really always, you know, focused on working on those, we're really focused on those types of interactions that are good, that are easy for us, right? What do we do when we, and how do we see the interactions that are not as easy, right? That are a bit more challenging for us to work through and to understand. So we kind of take this approach to conflict. And again, our view of conflict is St. Stephen's, if you will, motto or manifesto around conflict. Conflict is something that is inevitable. It is going to show up when we least expect it. It will show up in all of our relationships and interactions. And it really shows up because it comes with difference, right? Conflict is possible whenever those differences are there. Differences in ideas, in thoughts, differences in experiences and perspectives, really differences in even how we think and feel, how we prioritize. So once differences shows up, right, and you feel one way and I feel another, you know, the opportunity for conflict, right, is present. It is inevitable. So what do we do with this thing that sometimes causes us all these, you know, these different or negative emotions, really, but at the same time, we have to acknowledge that, you know, it's possible anywhere, right? How then do we kind of, and is it possible for us to embrace conflict? And we invite you to see conflict this way. It's an opportunity for learning, dialogue, and understanding, right? This is, you know, the space where if we are able to actually hear each other, you know, and be willing to be open to those differences, we can really learn a lot about each other, right? And I know in community, when we have and we hold space in a way that's good for us, that's what we really honor, right? Like we can come together and hear each other and understand, right? We can discuss and dialogue and develop an understanding about each other and our perspectives in a way that then means that conflict doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's just means that we have, you know, different views and we can now hear and understand why we're each, you know, kind of in that position. All of you have mentioned, you know, in talking about what brings you here today, that it's really about relationships, right? It's about the opportunity to be better, you know, to be with people differently, to be able to preserve and strengthen, you know, relationships, whether they be with your neighbors or those that even that have some level of power over us, or even, you know, with those that we have to, with our families, like our really personal and close and intimate relationships as well. And how we deal with conflict really means is either going to make or break many of these relationships sometimes, right? Being able to deal with them well. If we're paying attention, indicators of conflict can be recognized. Like we kind of know, you know, we can feel it out intuitively, like, hey, something here could potentially lead us into this, you know, could lead us into an argument, could lead us into a breakdown. So if we're aware of that, what do we do? right? Or we kind of, we start to feel that, hey, I need to be prepared or ready to deal with the situation differently because it could lead into this. If we're able to recognize it, then we know that in fact we've got strategies, some tools, if you will, some tools in the toolkit or on our tool belt that we can pull out and use when we need them, right? There are strategies like that. And a few of them we're going to talk about today, right? I'll be able to mention them to you. We'll be able to practice them a bit. We won't have enough time to really like dig into them, unfortunately. I think finally, knowing that you can recognize conflict, that in fact there are some tools and approaches that you can take to dealing with conflict, leaves you feeling like, hey, this is something that I can do, right? And the more often that we actually do and kind of do conflict well or handle conflict well, manage it, if you will, transform it. I'm trying to think of as many words as possible to say, hey, there are things that we can actually do with it. It doesn't have to completely overpower us all of the time. We can feel so good about ourselves, knowing that we tried something out, we tried a technique or a strategy we've never used before. And in fact, the outcome of that situation was one that turned out, drastically different, or shifted even slightly. Let's say it's not drastically different, even slightly different. You're like, hey, this is something that I can do. And you know what? Maybe next time I'm going to do it again, right? And that's our goal right here, right? Just acknowledging that, in fact, this thing, conflict, that really can cause us a lot of, difficulty, confusion, nervousness, even pain, that there are ways that we can take conflict and transform it into something that, that can do us all a lot of good. All right. So then we say, all right, how do we approach conflict, right? So if we're going to really look at conflict as this opportunity, this thing that can lead us to learn and to have, different types of conversations, right? How do I need to approach conflict to be able to do that? And so we kind of start by saying there are these three categories, if you will, or primary ways that we can approach conflict resolution. And generally, we are going to find ourselves really kind of confronted with two: the power-based and the rights-based, right? And the power-based, in fact, just based on the introductions that you've shared today and the work that you're doing, is kind of a community's response to power-based conflict resolution not working out the way that we really need it to. So what's power-based? Power-based conflict resolution is authority, right? Coming in and saying, this is what you need to do. This is how we expect you to do it. Do it like this or else. Or else. That's our threat. That's our intimidation. People coming in with power who are honestly really resolving conflict based on their terms only, right? This is what they expect. This is how we do it. We'll also see this power-based kind of also show up in numbers, right? So when we're thinking about people striking, protesting, walking out, we're actually pulling power in numbers, right? To be visible. And through that way, sometimes make our demands and shift, and get things and create change that way, right? We also know that the power-based approach comes with a lot of, consequences as well. How do people feel when power comes in and just tells us what to do, right? Forces us, in fact, without hearing, without listening, without responding to community or responding to people generally. We know what that feels like, right? We also know that, in fact, if we really want to have people with us, right, and kind of moving and changing together, power-based is not the way to get the masses, right? It's not necessarily the way that we get people to make change together. Rights-based, right? The rights-based approach is like, well, it's the rules. The rules say that, in fact, this is how things should be done. Laws, policies, you know, that really outline things, lay things out in writing, and then create this kind of reference point back. We kind of go back to the rules all the time. Well, the rules say that, in fact, you shouldn't be doing all of these things, right? As one way. And if things are nuanced and, you know, there's differences of opinions, we kind of also, you know, will always say, well, it's written here. And in fact, this is how we should handle it. And step 1 says do this, and step 2 says do that. And that's how I'm going to handle, you know, this situation or this disagreement or difference of opinion right now. But similarly, we also know that rights-based, like our power-based, it's really like, who has created the laws and the policies? Do they reflect what people actually need, right? So we're kind of always challenged by these things. They really are there to create order. And oftentimes they are creating order for just some people, not others. I also need to acknowledge that there's a lot of value in the power-based in emergency situations, right? When our children are involved, right? We will often need somebody to delegate and tell us what we have to do. You know, we need you to be over here right now. Please move to this side. This area is not safe, right? We tell our children, hey, you've got to listen to us, right? We expect that they pay attention, especially when they're really young children. I'm not going to talk about the teenagers so much, but our younger children, when it comes to safety and emergencies, you know, being able to go and order when we need to is important. But we also understand the consequences of either of these approaches. So if our power-based and our rights-based are kind of the two main, you know, the top two main ways that we kind of go, or our go-to ways for resolving conflict, what happens, what other approach is there? And what happens when we know that, in fact, these two approaches do not allow people to be heard, you know, and respected and acknowledged and have their needs acknowledged? So we move into the needs-based or the interest-based approach, right? And the needs or interest-based approach to resolving conflict is that says, hey, if we really start to understand, right, and identify what is kind of, you know, what people's needs are, right? What's underneath them being angry right now or being frustrated right now. If I can get to that and then generate as many new ways as possible to meet those needs, hey, now we're resolving conflict differently, right? This is not about, oh, I told you to do it, or the rules say it's got to be done this way. It's really about being with people to understand what they need, what are their interests, and resolving conflicts from that space. And this is, in fact, the approach that St. Stephen's really is committed to, right? We work from the space of understanding people's needs, right? Or understanding interests, which are the feelings, the beliefs, needs and values, right? Understanding people from that space and say, hey, you know what, this is not about the person, but let me take time to really understand why they're taking this position, you know, or acting or reacting as they do. When we listen for interests or the underlying reasons why somebody says something or takes a particular position, it's an important step towards de-escalating difficult conversations, or let's say even handling or managing them, right? Just maybe for that moment in time, rather than reacting, you know, or meeting that person with the same level of emotion, right? I'm actually going to stop and take time to seek to understand what their interests are. And this is going to be my first step, my first conscientious step towards trying to, you know, get a handle on this difficult conversation. But good listening really de-escalates emotional speakers by helping them be clear, right? So in fact, it's interesting when we get into some more of the techniques, you know, being clear and really listening is how we're going to help those that we're speaking to get their thoughts clear and articulate themselves and share more. How are we going to do that? By listening. We'll talk more about that. It also helps us to avoid misunderstandings, right? when we're listening and we're kind of getting to what's below the surface, we're not really just only dealing with the behaviors. That's difficult, and that's where things break down. Well, I'm acting like this, and, well, you're doing this. I don't know. It becomes a really heavy cycle of people not hearing, not being able to hear, but also not being able, not being really listened to, right? We're both really just speaking and not hearing each other. And we're also really, once we get to this place where we're dealing with people based on their interests or their needs, we're also encouraging them to talk about the full range, the full range of what it is that they're experiencing and or wanting and hoping for at that time. It's really about their intentions and their needs, right? All this really easy work to do, of course, right? It's so simple. So what's beneath the surface? And again, what's beneath the surface is in fact the space where our feelings, needs, our experiences, our concerns, our interests all live. Sorry, I had to stop for a second. Let's collect my thoughts for a moment. So what's beneath the surface? And we kind of, on this slide, you'll see that there is here an image, some type of an image of an iceberg, And if anyone's ever been familiar with the analogy of the iceberg or the idea of the iceberg, right? This huge, massive structure that we see above the water. But what we see above the waterline, in fact, kind of represents only 10%, 10% of what the entirety of that iceberg is. 90%, imagine that 90% of the iceberg is actually beneath the waterline. And this is really a good way to think about, when we're encountering someone who is challenging us, who is addressing us or talking to us in these kind of confrontational ways, right? They're yelling insults maybe, or they're getting really aggravated and escalated. If you don't want my help, you can get out of here. You're useless. I don't have time for this. You never listen. You're not there for me. All these types of things, right? Sometimes what we want to do is really just go straight for what we're hearing. That's how we want to respond. We want to respond directly to the fact that somebody's saying to us that you are never there for me and I can't ever count on you. But in fact, what are they really saying? If we stop ourselves for a moment and we decide that we want to go beneath the surface, right? What do they need right now? What could they be needing right now when they say to us, oh, you're never there for me, right? What might be a value that's really important to them, right? An expectation maybe that hasn't been met, that in fact is now what we're getting is just the product of that. We're getting the fact that I'm really upset that I had an experience or a need that you weren't able to meet me with. But all I can say to you right now is that you're never here for me. That's what I want you to know. That's how I've chosen to express myself. So when we go to the space of interest-based, we're going to, okay, how do I begin to understand, what this person really needed? What are maybe some of their experiences that they've had today? What are some of the, the needs, or challenges that they've had today? Can I have a conversation with them? Or can I listen to this person and be with them from that space? I kind of want to understand what the 90% is. I want to understand what this 90% is below the waterline. All right, so before we go there, I'm going to share a new screen with you, and I want you to take a look at this list of words. And Mercedes, if you're able to, and share the file, this one, needs and feelings, there, so that folks can also click it or, or get access to it or save it and have it for reference at any point when they need it. That would be great. So needs and values, right, are really these ideas that, okay, all of these things that kind of below the surface, right, they generate emotions, right? And these emotions are really positive when they're met, right? So we have values, a value to be a part of a team and to be heard and respected. Those are things that are really, really important to me, right? And I need connections, and I need a network, right? Those are all really important interests, right? And they generate emotions. When those things are met and acknowledged, the emotions that we feel are positive. When they're not met, these healthy needs to be connected and be a part of a group and a network, when they're not met, the emotions that come with that are negative, right? And those negative emotions are generally the things that we're going to see above the waterline, right? So when we're talking and we're saying, hey, can we identify or be able to share with somebody, these ideas of needs and values, we're really talking about this list of words here, right? These lists of words, right? Our need to have connection, good communication, affection, right? To have some recognition, to be appreciated and acknowledged, right? Respected, honesty and transparency, right? These are the types of things that we're saying to people like, hey, you have a really, that, being respected is something that's important to you, right? That's identifying a need, right? Being acknowledged, being heard, right? Having good communication. Those things are all important needs, right? And values to you. So I want to share those words because as we kind of come into some of the scenarios and we really start to talk about, okay, how would we respond? How would we respond and identify a feeling or a need? You've kind of got a reference for that as well. All right. I'll go back to the PowerPoints now. So once we have now assumed the position of like, okay, I'm going to start to respond to conflict, or I'm going to approach conflict from this place of understanding interests. The next question is like, okay, well, how do I understand interests? How do I get to this place where somebody's going, you're useless, you don't care about me, you're only here for this. How do I get to this place now where I really start to understand interests and start to have a conversation based on that? And this is where I introduced the first of our techniques called claim. And I have started to affectionately say, I'm going to, and we are working towards claiming our conflict. Thank you very much, Baralan. Claiming our conflict. So what is claim? Claim is a reminder of the kind of 4 to 5 steps that you would take to be able to have a different type of conversation, right? To be able to shift from, okay, somebody's just trying to be confrontational into, okay, we're going to have a conversation that is about identifying interests and needs. And we do this first, and we begin doing this by centering ourselves. So getting prepared to do the hard work of listening to somebody, of trying to be present with them. We want to center ourselves. We start with ourselves first. And I know this has probably come up in many of the sessions that you've had with the speakers before, that really caring for others is impossible if we haven't cared for ourselves. So what are the things that you would do in that moment to get yourself centered? Next, we're going to listen for what's important, right? And listening for what's important to the person is exactly the idea of being able to listen for the feelings, the needs, values, interests, all of that stuff below the waterline, right? So as people are saying things to us or making comments, right, how are we really able to identify, okay, what's important to that person? What feelings and values are important there? Next, we're going to acknowledge. We're going to acknowledge what we hear, and then we're going to pause for a response. But acknowledging what you hear is really being able to say to somebody, hey, I hear right now, and it sounds like you are really mad, or you are feeling so frustrated right now that you have had to wait and people are not returning your phone calls and you really don't know what's going on. That's acknowledging. It's not adding your own thoughts or your own ideas or perspective in it. It's really just reflecting back to someone and reflecting back to the person that you're speaking to, what they're saying to you. You pause and you check in to make sure that you've heard correctly. Next, you invite more information, right? And you invite more information in the way that you ask questions. And you ask questions that allow the person you're speaking with to offer, right? To be able to offer, can you tell me more? That you want them to give you more details, right? What happened next? How did that make you feel, right? And you notice that in those questions, there are really no assumptions around, did that make you feel mad? We're not kind of offering, our own perspectives. We're just asking the open-ended question that leaves somebody space to tell you exactly what they need. So what happened next? Tell me what happened. At first you sent an email or you made a phone call and nobody got back to you. That's making you feel really frustrated or ignored. What did you do next? Right? Tell me what you did next. When we have that type of conversation where we're listening for what's important, acknowledging and inviting more information, we do that until we have enough details to then be able to move towards problem solving, right? So after we understand enough of what's important to the person, what their needs and interests are, then we're really ready, because we have enough details and insights to then move towards problem solving. Any questions so far? I'm going to share another sheet with you again.
I have a question, Kaydeen.
Yes, please.
At what point is a good time to ask someone if they want help or if they want problem solving? Because so many times people just want to have you hear them.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure when it would be a good time to either leave that out or not.
Mm-hmm. That's a great
Thank
question, Lee. Thank you very much. It's a really important question too, because you know what? Problem solving comes at the very, very end. At the very end of probably having a really maybe long conversation, or maybe after doing a lot of listening, right? And I think it's really important to say that we won't even assume that somebody wants, a problem solving. We'd ask exactly as you said. Do you want help? Can I offer you advice? Is it okay for me to make a suggestion? Right? I think that's the kindest way to do that, because we make no assumptions about what a person needs at that time, and we just check in with them and we ask, right? I personally am working towards asking after a certain amount of time. I don't even want to ask if I can make a suggestion until I've been able to listen to them, for 15 minutes maybe, right? Have I asked 3 or 4 questions? Tell me more. What did you do next? How are you feeling? What would the best outcome be for you right now? What would you like to see happen? Can I go through all of those questions first before I get to the place of can I make a suggestion? Now, that's my last question, right? And I think that's probably the best. There's no way to know. To check in and ask would be my first suggestion, but let's go through a quick list of check-in questions with a person first before we make any suggestions on if they'd like a solution or how they'd like help or not. Teresa, I see your hand up.
Hi, Teresa. You can go ahead and unmute yourself, or
Yes.
perhaps Mercedes can do it for you.
The mute is in the bottom left corner. Just,
Mhm.
just so you know.
Oh, it's okay. Let's go ahead, Kaydeen, because she might have had to get off for whatever reason.
Okay, no problem. Thank you very much. So I've got another handout on the screen, and thanks, Mercedes. We're glad you're back. Mercedes has put the links in the chat for both of the sheets as well. And I also think that if possible, if people want to have the list of feelings and needs words as well as this handout, to please feel free to email and share with folks after the session as well. Right, so the second handout is a bit of a reminder. Okay, this is what claim is, right? So if you wanted to have that, you can remind yourself what it is, what the letters stand for, and in fact, yeah, what are you trying to do or achieve in each of those steps that you take. All right, so when we go to the second part of this page, right, we're getting to really how do we do this active listening, right? So when we're acknowledging, right, how do we acknowledge what we're hearing, right? How do we, Perfect. Thank you so much, Allison. Those are great questions, because those are the types of questions that are the open-ended questions that we ask to keep our conversation going. I make no assumptions about what's best or what a person needs. I'm just going to ask so that in fact they offer what they need to you. Let it come from them. So the questions that Allison has put here, what do you want to do about it? Have you found anything that works for you or resonates for you? Really, there's so much power because we're putting all the ownership and all of, what's best and the possible solutions back to the person who needs them. So in fact, they get to really say, yeah, this is what I think, this is what the best outcome would be. This is what I would like to see happen. On the top part of the screen here, ask open-ended questions. So open-ended questions, in addition to what Allison has said, are things like, what happened next? Can you say more about that? How were you hoping the discussion with the community member would go? Can you give me an example? If X or if this happened, how would that affect you? Can you tell me more about the impact the comments have had on you? And if you noticed, what's a good open-ended question? The open-ended question, and even all of those questions that I've just read and that Allison offered as well, do not get answered with simply a yes or a no. Right? That's what we're trying to avoid. So what happened next means that somebody has to, in fact, tell you, well, the next thing I did was this. And then after that, something else happened. Versus, okay, so when that happened, did you go outside and knock on someone's door? No, I didn't, right? You've basically given me an answer and that's what happened. And I'm saying no, but I also don't feel the need to say much more than that. So how we ask our questions can be really important. And those are just some examples, but you think of that the questions that you ask are really not about somebody just saying yes or no. They're really an opportunity for them to tell you more, to give you the details that you need. So the acknowledging skills kind of look like this. We can restate, we can reflect feelings and as well values and intentions. And restating is kind of like just telling somebody that you've heard all the facts that they've shared with you. Okay, you woke up, you got up this morning, you went out, it was a rough day, this happened, basic statement of facts. Right? You can summarize what the other person has said. And then as you can see, you've got at the bottom here, there's some just examples of how those statements would sound. Absolutely. The reflecting of feelings is really about, okay, to identifying the speaker's emotions, right? So you're hearing somebody say they went out, they had a really rough day, and then a bunch of bad things happened. That must have been really frustrating. You must have been feeling overwhelmed. Again, you've got a list of words, so you can really, be selective about the types of feelings and emotions that you want to speak to. And I think the list of words, sometimes we take for granted that our emotions can be so complex, really, that being able to identify them and find the right word to speak to them is not always that easy. We don't always have access to those words. So I think the list of emotions can be really useful for you as well. If you see the example, you're feeling really frustrated at having been kept waiting for the meeting to start when you're so busy. And then you check in, is that correct? Yeah, you give a person to say, you give somebody the opportunity to say, yes, you're right. No, that's not correct. In fact, I wasn't really frustrated. I'm feeling impatient and overwhelmed. I have too many other things to do, right? So we're also giving them a chance to correct us if we're wrong. And then reflecting back values and positive attention, similar to the feelings, except now we're actually going to other types of words and feelings. We're thinking about, okay, efforts that people have made, motives, intentions that they've had. So you're saying that when you raise your voice, it was just to get my attention. Is that right? It wasn't that you were mad or you were trying to disrupt. You just felt you needed to speak up. Yeah, it's a positive. That's a positive intention. Right. So I think that, it's kind of a lot that I'm sharing, but I really just want you to realize that, hey, there are just ways that we can shift slightly the way that we respond or that we hear somebody that really lets them know that we are listening. And this, in fact, is active listening. Right? We're not just listening passively. We're taking notes or looking at our phones and someone's talking to us. We may hear the words that they're saying, but the active listening is really about interacting with somebody in a particular way so that they also know that you are listening and you are present with them. And so that they also know that, in fact, you're on the same page as them, right? You're actually understanding where they're coming from. And that's really important. When someone feels like they've been understood or they've been heard, right? People are actually listening to them. Do they still need to continually get more and more angry, right? In fact, once a person feels heard, first step to them calming down, even minutely. And the more that we can do the active listening, we can continue to help somebody just feel like, yeah, in fact, they're being heard, so they don't need to get louder. Any comments before I go on? Yes, you will also get this sheet. So this 2-page handout, I'm hoping it will get shared with you along with the feelings and needs words. So you'll have them for reference afterwards. Thank you. Yes. Nadia, I appreciate you telling me or mentioning being mindful. Are there any particular words that you would say, let's be mindful of when we're speaking to around conflict?
Like what I'm saying, like don't assume, and if the person, you know, like you have to be careful of what you say.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the person can take it,
Mm-hmm.
different
Mm-hmm.
way.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Then
Mm-hmm.
then you see problems arise after.
Mm-hmm. You're very correct in that, being conscientious of that. I also think that when you're hearing and listening to somebody, being able to say to them, what I'm hearing is, I'm kind of hearing right now that this is making you angry. Is that correct? So as you're identifying things and you're kind of picking up on things, we see people's faces and we see their expressions change. We hear their tone of voice change as well. It might speed up, they might get louder. Once we start to hear those things and we want to move into our active listening. If we're hearing something, let's check in, let's ask. Let's always ask, am I right? Am I correct in that? Is that what's happening right now? Would you like to tell me more? Right. So you're very correct. Let's be aware what we're saying. Let's not make any assumptions. And as we're doing that, we manage our assumptions by saying, let's check in. Let me check in with you, right? And I'm going to ask. All right. I've got one more technique that I'd like to share. And this is called How We Raise Our Concerns. And this one's called PI. So I'm going to go to that. Right, so we talked quite a bit about active listening. So that's what that slide was about. All right. This was just one way of summarizing, right? Active listening techniques. How we acknowledge information is by restating and reflecting, and how we invite more information is how we really ask questions and encourage the speaker with our bodies, with just our facial expressions, with our eye contact, you know, with having no distractions or not having our phone there, but really being present with them. And our presence, intentional presence, also encourages them, we hope, to talk more because they know that you're really listening to them as well. So we're going to move on to our last technique, and this is now raising our concerns, right? So we are all going to have times when we feel annoyed, upset, angry about somebody else's behavior, right? It may have also been because their behavior, actions, or words have had some kind of impact on us in a direct way, right? The choices that we make then about how we bring up our concerns is going to make a big difference in how the other person responds, right? So if a person feels like, you know, we need to address a behavior, but we're now, because we have been emotionally impacted we've got our own feelings about it, we go to the person and we approach them. If they feel like we're accusing them of something, we're blaming them of something, you know, this would have never happened if you hadn't done this, or if you had just shown up on time, things would be different, right? If they feel like, you know, you were the reason why this happened, they're being accused or judged or blamed, right? What happens after that? Are they going to hear you? Are they actually going to be able to listen to and hear the concern or the impact of an action? Because that's really why you're addressing them in the first place, right? They probably won't, right? They're going to get defensive. First off, if you feel like you're being attacked, you're going to protect yourself, right? And you're in fact going to say, no, it's not about me. Why are you talking to me this way? Why are you approaching me this way? And then people, in fact, are going to, you know, because they need to defend themselves and protect themselves, are going to probably lash out and attack you in return, right? And it happens so commonly. It happens so commonly, and that we then are also like, okay, if I know that I really need to address a behavior or an action or something that somebody said, and if they're not going to hear me and it's going to turn into an argument, am I going to do it? You know, am I going to still approach this way? You kind of start to think twice about it, right? You really do, because you're like, I just don't know how to bring this thing up and be heard. We're going back to our own need now to be heard and acknowledged. So what do we do? What do we do? How do we kind of now address this in a way that, in fact, what was really important to you can be heard and respected by the other person? And I'm going to suggest that we give them pie, right? We're going to give them pie. Most people enjoy pie. It's sweet. It tastes good, you know, and hopefully you are allowed to eat pie, you know, and can enjoy it. But we're thinking of pie as this thing, you know, that is enjoyable to consume. And that's what we're thinking about our concerns. We're going to share our concerns with somebody, and hopefully it'll be something that they can be open to actually hearing and accepting and tasting, if you will, you know, just being able to taste it and allow it. And PI stands for this. It's another acronym for you now. We've got claim and we've got PI. And PI is this. Let's start with a positive opening, right? Positive openings help set the friendly tone, right? They could show some understanding of what the person wants, how they see things, what they've been going through. Let's just let somebody know we acknowledge them, we see them. We can give them the benefit of the doubt. You know, it could be about that, you know, they didn't mean to cause you problems. It could be about appreciating something good that they've done, right? So pie is really about, the P in pie is like, let's start with a positive opening. Hey, I just wanted to let you know, I appreciate the fact that you're just, you know, you're an excellent community worker. You are, you know, so reliable. You are always present for our community meetings, right? And the people who know you, they respect and they love you so much, right? Like that's 4 kind of really simple positive things to let someone know that you've heard them, right? That you see them, that you know who they are. And then we're going to move to the impact, right? And the impact as the I, it's kind of the center. It's the real juicy part of the pie itself. But the impact is really what you have and are wanting to address, right? This is the impact of what their action, their behavior, their words are. And then the impact is also about how it affected you and your needs, right? It's not about the other person. It's not in a judgment or an accusation. It's just really saying, hey, this behavior and this action now is having an impact on me or on us. And if we're really, you know, speaking from ourselves and, you know, speaking to the impacts and how they affected us, this is really much easier for people to hear than blame or judgment or criticism, right? You know, I appreciate your work. I appreciate that you're so committed to our community group and you show up and you know, and the community respects you a great deal. I just wanted to let you know that, you know, at last meeting, you know, when you said something, it really had an impact on me and made me feel disrespected and disregarded, right? So we turn, in fact, the impact back is really back to your own needs, right? It's not about the other person. It's not about, oh, you know, you wanted to disrespect me and you were, you know, you were trying to be rude to me. No, it's in fact, I want to let you know that what I felt disrespected, you know, when this was said. And then finally, we're going to the E, which is kind of like the last opportunity to say, hey, can we talk this over? You know, could we take a moment and talk about this more? And that's the exploration of it. Or it could really be the expectation. Like, I want to let you know that, hey, maybe next time, comments about people from this place, you know, can we avoid them? Can we avoid them? Because I felt really disrespected about it. Is that something that we can talk about? So finally, you kind of close your concern with either the opportunity to talk things over more, that's your exploration, or the expectation is really about what you would like or need from them in the future, right? And that's pie. So our pie statements could sound like this. Hey, you know, I'm so thankful, you know, that you're a part of our community group. You're always so consistent and, you know, you're just a great volunteer and member of our group. Last week, when, you know, you made a comment about something, I personally felt really disrespected by it. You know, it had an impact on me and made me not feel comfortable being in the space after that. You know, is this something that we can talk about? I'd really like to, you know, understand better what you needed, or, you know, maybe next time we can just avoid making comments like that because they really can, you know, make people feel bad. That would be a sample pie statement, how we raise our concerns. Any questions or thoughts? So that's kind of a lot. I know. It's a lot to absorb. It's a lot to kind of digest all at once. And it is also really not the common ways that we kind of communicate and do things with people. You know, not unless we've been taught or we've practiced or somebody told us and trained us before, right? These are sometimes they're outside of the normal way that we approach conversations. So they're really new and require practice. I promise you, nobody is perfect. Nobody will be perfect at doing this, you know, the first time that they try. It takes some, thank you. It takes some time to get comfortable doing this because it's outside of how we would normally approach it. So I wanted to try and apply these 3 techniques. So we have claim, which is kind of claim with the active listening right in the middle of it. Active listening and raising our concerns. And I really would like us to do this as a group, right? To think about, okay, what are some of the approaches, you know, or techniques that we could use first to maybe respond to any of these situations or scenarios, right? What might you say? What would you like to acknowledge? Feeling would you like to acknowledge? Or question would you ask to kind of keep the dialogue open, right? If you need to raise a concern, what would that concern be? And how would you do that? Right, so we can do this as a group. So this is the point now where I don't talk as much, right? I'll read the scenarios and I would really invite any of the group members, like, how would you respond? What technique would you want to do or try first? And what would you say, right? So please feel free to unmute as necessary and we'll try this out. So scenario 1, all right, you have an organizer. So that's one of the leaders in the community is approached by a neighbor who has some type of unmet needs, right? That the organizer does not have the skills or resources to respond to. So the organizer is cornered in the stairwell as the neighbor berates them for not fulfilling their expectations, drawing from previous experiences of not having their needs addressed by community organizations and organizing groups. All right. Somebody's feeling frustrated, absolutely, and they see you coming home one day and they stop you in the stairwell and they're just ready to say everything to you because you're not able to be there for them at the moment. What do you do? What do you do? So think about, let's go back, let's see. Think about some of the skills. You know what I'm going to share? I'm going to share this sheet instead. This might be the better one. All right. So we've got claim as well as some of these active listening responses. All right. All right. Thank you very much, Lee. All right. So Lee has put in the chat, first thing, breathe. Breathe. Lee, why did you put breathe first? First, breathe, full stop. Tell me why.
Well, you probably are caught off guard. It sounds like they've really like cornered you there. It literally says that you're cornered in the stairwell.
Mm-hmm.
So you might not be feeling ready for this moment. You might be coming from work or you've had like a super difficult day, like who knows what's going on with you. So just take a moment and breathe first because I think that'll help like calm you, and instead of just having like a quick reaction, because sometimes we do say the wrong thing. Sometimes we do get upset when someone's upset. Sometimes that's how we just like tend to respond, especially when we're surprised. So I just said breathe because I think that can just help with the whole scenario in general, maybe.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I really wanted to highlight that because You're right, right? With our claim steps, in fact, the C of centering yourself is just that, right? Before we're able to listen, before we're able to do the work of like acknowledging what someone's hearing, you know, or what you're hearing or what someone's saying, you have to be prepared, right? To be able to do that and get yourself ready, you know, to not take things personally, to do your active listening, as well as to not, you know, react right away. So it's literally stopping, taking a deep breath. You can maybe take a step back if you need to. And then you said listen for what? Listen to what the person's saying, right?
And like what they might be saying that's most important to them.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's not always just what someone's complaining about either.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it, like you said, there's like, it can be a lot deeper than that. So not having your needs met by various community organizations and various organizing groups can be very frustrating, because you feel like that's why those organizing groups are there. They're supposed to be there to be helping people. And if you're someone that needs help, why are your needs not being met? So I think for someone who's, again, been repeatedly hurt, they could actually take that as like a personal hurt. You know, they feel some kind of trauma by that. So you're an organizer, so they, you know, may not trust you. They, you know, don't feel like you're meeting their expectations, or your organization is meeting their expectations or going to. So you need to start building trust. And I think you have to listen to them to do that. What are those needs? Why were they not met?
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. I want to go back to this needs and values sheet and ask any of the members or anybody in the session tonight. So based on that situation, right? Somebody saying that, you know what, they're really upset about you not returning their call, but more importantly, because you know what, people often don't return my calls and don't follow up and don't respond and do the things that they say they're going to do, right? If you wanted to reflect back a value or an interest, and that's why I pulled this list up, right? What might be some of those words or interests that you might want to reflect back to them? Like, what's important to them? What do you think is really important to that person and in that scenario where you're now being confronted with their anger or frustration?
I guess being acknowledged.
Absolutely, right? So being acknowledged, right? Being acknowledged, having somebody, you know, hear you or respond, right? Respond to your question or your query. Absolutely. Anything else? Anything else that people think? What else might be really, really important to that person right now? Thank you. Recognition.
Kaydeen, I think they might want your attention. How about that? You know, they want your undivided attention.
All right. You just want somebody, you need somebody's attention right now. You,
Right.
you know, having somebody to be there and supportive of you is really important to you right now. Is that correct? Right? Absolutely. Allison shared a great comment, right? And actually put a whole response in there. It seems like you sound frustrated. That's what I'm hearing. Is that right? Right. So Allison, kind of to Nadia's point earlier, let's not make any assumptions. And if we do assume frustration, you know, you sound frustrated, angry. Is that right? Let me check in and ask, right? Because I won't assume, but I'm going to ask you, you know, at least, yeah, I'm frustrated. I'm so frustrated. People never respond to me. They never call me back. Don't they know that what I need is important? I can understand right now that, you know, being heard, being recognized, being acknowledged are really important things to you, right? That's how we reflect back. We can reflect back feelings and values. If you want to, you can say, you know, if they've given you other details, you can reflect back. We can also reflect back facts that they've shared with you, you know. So you're saying that, you know, you called me, right? You called me and you left me, or you sent me a message, you know, 4 days ago, and I haven't responded to you, right? And you know, being acknowledged and you know, being heard and having somebody get back to you in a timely manner are things that are really important to you. Is that correct? Right? It's really important to you. Now you can address it. Yeah, in fact, it is really important to me. You know what? If you responded to me in 24 hours, that would be better. It's been 4 days and you haven't been able to get back to me. Okay, I understand. You know, so having somebody get back to you in 24 hours, you know, helps you feel like, yeah, you've been heard, or at least lets you know that they've gotten your message. Is that right? Yes, that's right. So next time, you know, if I message you, even if you just let me know, hey, I'm really busy, you know, I'll get back to you in 24 hours, will let me know that at least you've got my message and you're not ignoring me, right? And then now we've kind of gone through some active listening. We've kind of identified a few things. We've acknowledged, we've asked some questions. And now they've said, yeah, you know what? A response in 24 hours is all I needed. All right, now I understand better. You know, in fact, thank you for letting me know, you know, that my not answering you can cause you distress. Now I'm more aware. And next time, what I'll try to do is in 24 hours or within this time, I'll at least let you know that, hey, I'll get back to you in a day or two if I need more time. So at least you feel like you've been acknowledged and heard. Right? Allison has also said, you know, is it okay if we talk about this later or talk about this some more? You know, is it okay if we make some more time? All right. Like I'm in the stairwell. I was just heading home. Is it okay if, you know, we have a phone call in a day or two and we can talk about this some more? You know, I would really like to understand so I don't offend you again in the future. Did that feel comfortable for people? I'm just wondering. I know I was kind of talking and responding to myself a little bit there, right? But kind of just hearing that process of asking some questions, checking in, getting confirmation. Does that feel like something that folks can do or is possible? Thank you.
Kaydeen, I think you're responding how you would want somebody to respond to you.
Oh, thank you very much.
You know what I mean? Like, for
Caroline,
instance,
yeah.
if you had that experience, you know,
Yeah.
somebody approach you, you know, and I think, you know, that's how you probably would treat the other person. So,
yeah. Thank you, Berlano. I think that's profound. As simple as it is, it's so profound, right? You responded the way that you hope somebody would respond to you in that situation, right? And really give your needs or what's important to you, you know, at that moment in time, some acknowledgement, because that makes you feel like, hey, for that moment in time, that person was willing to just be present with me, you know what I mean? And give me what I need. And once you have what you need, even, you know, minutely for that moment, you're able to kind of just release a little bit. You kind of let that tension go, right? So I think that's really important value, you know, or position to say, hey, I would respond to somebody the way that I hope someone would respond to me. Thank you.
Katie?
Yes.
It's Haida. Can I just ask a question?
Absolutely, Ida. Go ahead.
What can you do when someone said you are not there for them and you know you are doing your best? How can you help that person?
So how do you help somebody who says to you that you are not there for them?
Right.
Right.
When
and you want to be
doing
there
your
for them
best.
when you're doing your best. Yeah. Very good question, because it's a similar one to almost another one that was shared in the chat. but you know that you're putting out the effort. You know that you're putting out the effort.
Yeah.
But how people are receiving it or seeing it, they still need more from you in that moment almost, right? Asking for a little bit more. And I think what my one side of my brain wants to say first, you know, this first thing that we kind of want to do is stop and be like, no, I am here for you. I'm here all the time. Don't you see all the things that I do? You know, don't you see all the efforts that I make, right? We have our own needs as well. And we all want to be acknowledged, you know, in different ways. You're so right. So being able to know that, hey, that's kind of our first desire almost, right? To kind of respond that way. Yeah. However, if somebody's saying to you that, yeah, you're not here for me, and you're saying, yes, I am, they're going, no, you're not. Last week I called you and you didn't answer my call. And you're like, yeah, but I'm so busy. It's so tiring and overwhelming, right? And so what I'm going to suggest here, and it does take a little bit of time, right? But even in that moment, just so that we can stop, you know, the cycle of attack and defend, and I'm going to defend myself and then put it back on you, and then you're going to defend yourself, just to stop that, you know, for the moment, we're going to go right into active listening. So let's acknowledge, let's take a moment for ourselves. I'm going to take a deep breath. You know, I'm going to look at the other person and say, wow, I didn't know that you felt that way. Thank you for letting me know. Right. Okay. So we don't resist it. We don't want to defend. We're really just going to allow ourselves to be with the person for that moment. You know, I'm going to say that my active listening response would be this. What value do you think, and the list is still up here, what value do you think is really important for them right now, you know, that maybe hasn't been met? Right? By them saying, hey, you're not here for me. You're not here for me. What do you think it is that they really need right now that you can acknowledge for them?
Like, I'm just saying that, you know, you try your best to give them all the love in the world. So I am, you know, thinking that there is nothing that you can left that say myself can do, because I would put everything out there. So basically, I just feel that the person may really need some help, that they can see and understand that where it's not coming from who they are putting it on, but it's for themselves that needs the help. You know, so
I'm going to ask another question then.
Yeah.
With side up. What question could you ask them then when they say? Is there a question that you could, that kind of open-ended question that you could ask?
Okay, I ask like question, what can I do? Is there something that I'm not doing that, you know, to make you be happy? Just
I think Masaida maybe froze.
Yeah.
I was waiting. Yeah, I was waiting for her to say more, right?
Yeah,
And then I'm
yeah.
like, he hasn't moved. He hasn't moved, right? But I think that's a very good point, right? Like right now we want to do two things. We want to just leave space for them to offer more, right? What do what is it that you might need right now, that you think you need? Is there anything that I haven't done? Maybe that's the better question. Maybe it's not what I have done, right? Maybe what is it that I didn't do, that now has you feeling this way? Help me understand, right? Help me understand.
Kaydeen, one of the things that come to mind too, sometimes I tend to do an assessment, because sometimes people could come in from a place of wanting to say something to irritate you, or sometimes they, they want to give you a guilt trip. They want to go, in terms of making you feel guilty, or sometimes they could be using that as a distraction tactic to distract you from the real issue. you know, because, you know, so one of the things that one of the word that come to me is communication. And oftentimes sometimes people don't really, you know, want to communicate about certain things, especially if they know, if they feel like, you know, they aren't doing the right thing or they didn't do the right thing, right? So.
How do you assess, Berlan? Because you said you started out by saying, I do a bit of an assessment. How do you assess?
Well, you know, I listen to what the person have to say, you know, and then I, you know, try to do a bit of reflection. Where did I feel this before? Where did I heard this information before? You know, what experience what had me and this person experienced before. So then so I could, you know, put the pieces together for it to make sense to me, and so I could respond. But I take the time to actually listen. So I actively listen. I start to do a bit of reflection afterwards, and then put the pieces together.
Absolutely. So I think that while you're listening, now add to that what questions can I ask this person, you know, to get more clarity? What questions can I really, and the questions aren't really only about what you want to know, but really a genuine curiosity. Like, I want to understand. If you can take the position of, I want to understand why this person decided today that they choose to approach me like this. You know what? For a moment, all right. You know what? Don't resist. That's kind of where we kind of start. Sometimes we say, don't resist, right? And the resisting is really about, let's not get defensive or feel the need to have to automatically defend ourselves. All right, I hear you. You know, you're feeling particularly upset today. It was a difficult day. Now you're really upset about these things happening, right? Can you tell me tell me more about how I've also, you know, not been able to do something for you today. Really, I want to understand better how I contributed, you know, or played a part, if you will, in this challenging situation right now, right? And let them give you more information.
Kaydeen, I think it's important to ask a person what they want. What they want you to do, what they want you to say, because, you know, sometimes we might assume a person wants something totally different from what we assume that they might need, right? So I think it's important to ask a person what their needs are.
Yeah, what do they need? That's one of the questions. Let's hold that question in our toolkit as one of the really important ones that we ask. What do you need? You know, what's the best outcome for you in this situation? What would you like to see happen to make this better? How could we do things differently next time, right? And how could we do things differently next time so that it's satisfying to you, right? These are just to get ideas, right? But again, the idea is that it's the opportunity to just let them respond, right? And give them a chance to answer and give you more information based on what they say to you, you know, and the type of response that you get. That leads to the next question and what you also acknowledge, right? So based on that response, do you hear a feeling or a value that's really important? Oh, you know what, now it makes sense to me. Now I can understand that, in fact, it's really about organization. You know, you like when things are organized and you really appreciate knowing, you know, and being kept informed, right? So now I know, hey, let's do a better job of getting you information that you need next time, right?
And that would ultimately resolve the conflict.
We hope in the perfect world, it would all get resolved right away, right? Sometimes it takes time, right? Most of the time it will take time, but that's what we're going for. Like, hey, once I understand and they hear, you know what? Yeah, this person recognizes that, you know, being organized and you know, and for me, being organized and being kept informed is really important, right? Now we have a bit of an understanding. I just noticed that Temi, I apologize if I have their name, if I didn't pronounce.
Oh, no. You said that properly.
Okay, perfect. Hi, Temi. Yeah, you had your hand up as well. Did you have a comment?
Yes, I had a question, and it was almost similar to what Ms. Beryl Ann had. I wanted to know whether it's like, you know, resolving those conflicts, whether it's a short-term solution when you have a personality that is you know, like a personality that actually wants to have an argument for a reason. Like just as Beryl Ann had mentioned, like when they're trying to distract you from something they've done, you know, even if you're asking them, what do you want? Like, how can we resolve this? If it's something that's buried within them, how do we make sure that it doesn't keep popping up?
That's a big question. That's definitely a big question. I personally would have to say that I don't have an answer for that necessarily. Because if we've gotten to the point now where we know personalities, we know our people in our community, you know we have relationships with them and we understand, right? And if we know that right now that this is kind of, there are other needs that you won't be able to meet for that person, or there are other supports that they might need as well. Maybe the short term is all that you can create, you know, that's the space that you can create for yourself at that moment in time, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. That
And
actually answers it.
Yeah, I think it's an important acknowledgement to say, hey, maybe for that moment in time, I got to meet that person, you know, deal with them. Maybe I'm going to do a different job of listening to them differently, right?
Okay.
And see it and see the outcome. And if we can resolve for that moment in time, that's a success as well, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for your question as well. I'm also very aware of the time. Oh my goodness, we're just a few minutes away from 8 o'clock. Oh my.
Thank you, Kaydeen, for noticing that.
Yeah. I
You did
know
an
the
awesome
questions
job,
will come
Kaydeen.
up. Yeah, we'll keep talking and talking, and then we'll be here too late. But there were a couple of excellent comments in the chat too. So I think maybe I'd just like to also acknowledge that, yeah, the organizers also have your own needs, right? You also have your own needs. You have your own, you do your own work, and you will have your own value system that you want to acknowledge, right? Being aware of those things then, I think, is like a first step to also being able to say, hey, how do I get activated? What are the things that kind of get me reactive as well, right? Can I be aware of those things? Because we will all contribute to conflicts, you know, in our own ways, because we have our own needs as well. And if they're not met, we are equally, you know, in a position to want to get loud, right? Or be heard or acknowledged as well.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is it also okay to step back if you cannot handle the situation?
Yes, it is. 100% without a doubt. 100% without a doubt. Step back, take space, take time as you need to, right?
Yeah.
How do you do that though? How do you do that when someone's confronting you, right? And that's kind of the tricky part.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna elaborate about. Me, I personally, I would go for a walk, or I would like think about the situation, or write it down in a way. So examine the situation, and then, you know, see if we can, in a way, help the person, but like, you know, for it to go smoothly. So yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm so happy that you said, you know what, maybe I just need to take some time first to decide, right, how to respond to somebody. And that's really important, because that's the part of the caring for self, right? Most importantly, you know, knowing in the moment what you need to be able to respond, but also being able to say, hey, you know what, I got to leave and come back to this. Maybe if it's okay, can we talk about this in a day or two? You know, is it okay if we set some time to sit down and really talk about it? I know you're frustrated. I know that, you know, being heard and acknowledged is really important to you. It's important value to you right now. I would need a little bit of time for myself to be able to sit and be able to listen to you, you know, and really talk this out with you. Is that something that we can do later? Very important point. Thank you so much. Nita, I've noticed your hand is up as well. Maybe yours
Yeah,
will be
this
the
time.
last question. Thank you.
Thank you. I have noticed this happened to my group, that one of the volunteer, he needed a help really badly, and he was constantly calling me for the help. I talked with him once and noticed that I cannot help him because it was his personal issue. And when we do that, like when we say no, we really feel guilty inside. Like, I cannot help him. I don't know how no one else can help him. And I don't know how to tackle with those moments.
Thank you, Nita. It's a reality of being able to be a community member, helping other community members, because we're limited, right? We're limited. And really we have relationships with partners and agencies and our health centers and, you know, other workers to be able to do that, because there's only so much that we can do for a person. So I would say you did a number of things really well just from your sharing, is that you listened to them, right? You listened to him, you had a conversation with him, right? And then at some point in that you realize, like, hey, this is outside of what you're able to do, right? You can say no, absolutely. You can say no, but say no to what and how, right? I'm not able to. How else can I actually help you? I'm not able to do these things that you might need. What I can do is this, you know, what I can do is make a phone call. What I might be able to do is connect you with somebody else that I know, you know, or a supporter, an agency, someone that you can talk to. They may have some more ideas, right? So in fact, you are still really being there and still really being supportive, but you're also just saying, yeah, it just goes beyond what I'm able to do for you, right? So what other ways? Maybe there's something else we could do. Is that okay? Would you be comfortable if I tried to, if we made a phone call to somebody else, or I shared your name and phone number with someone else, right? Could we try that
Thank you.
instead? Yeah. Thank you so
This
much.
was
I am
helpful.
going to stop. I have to stop because I'm just so aware of the time. I know that your organizers as well really would want to close the space and offer a few more things. But I just want to wrap up by saying, hey, what we did today was like the first step. What we did today was like the first step. We spent some time really thinking about the fact that, you know, people have these needs, these values, interests. And if we can start by really identifying those things first. My son is like in full video game mode in the background, so I'm sorry. But if you know, we can stop and meet people there, that's like a first really important step that we can take to being with them and hearing them and starting this process of resolving conflict as well. So thank you very much for being a great audience today.
Thank you so much, Kaydeen. That was very detailed. I love the idea of pie. I hope all of our participants today not only use all of these things, but also just spread it around and tell people like what you learned tonight. Because if you just share a couple of these documents, or you just share a couple of these tips with people, I think it'll just spread around the community and just make people really feel heard and listened to. And that's what a lot of people want, I think. You know, they want to be heard, they want to be acknowledged, they want to be loved. And so that's what we're trying to do, I think, the most with our pods. So yeah, anyone who is working in the community or is just, you know, living in the community can do it. So I really hope people like really spread the word tonight. And that was so detailed and so helpful, because we can use it in so many aspects of our lives. So thank you, Kaydeen, for taking the time tonight. We really appreciate you coming. We do want to, I think actually Mercedes posted in the chat Oh, thank you to all our participants. I forgot to mention, like, you guys make it work. So I'm really glad you came out. I wanted to mention, if anyone is interested in volunteering, or perhaps starting a pod or coming to be a part of our community safety committee on Mondays. We normally have Monday night meetings at this time. So they're not this long usually, but for the workshops we're doing, we have upcoming workshops as well. And we also have, an email that you can contact us at on the Parkdale People's Economy page. I think it's on the 3rd page where we talk about Community Safety Committee. And you can message us there, and we are not super timely in our responses, but we're trying to be more timely. So we appreciate it because it is a lot of volunteers and there's so much work to be done. But yeah, we love it that people are getting more involved in teaching each other. Also, I wanted to, should I do a call out, Mercedes, for any, or Beryl Ann? Should I do a call out, Beryl Ann, for any other organizations?
Maybe I can just quickly jump in just to say what's in the chat. Just a quick heads up, we will share all the materials that Kaydeen shared with us tonight. We'll send a follow-up email. We've also put in the chat a feedback form. So please do let us know how these sessions are going. And we're definitely taking note of all the feedback. So thank you so much. We've also shared the page where we're sharing all our recordings and materials, so you can check that out there. And next week, we're going to have a suicide prevention workshop. So please, we added the link right there in the chat. It's also available on the website. And then finally, if you are free from 1 to 2 p.m. tomorrow, there is going to be a phone zap hosted by the Justice for Queens Hotel Coalition with regards to a new development being proposed at 1521 Queen Street West by the same developers who conducted a mass unlawful eviction of 27 tenants. So we're trying to demand justice for those former tenants, and really we would love if you could show up and show your support. Those are the main updates, I believe. Lee, unless you have any last comments, or Beryl Ann, we can close out the night. So
you managed to get a hold of Cassandra?
We did, yes. So next week, we're going to be joined by someone who Nadia actually connected us with, Cassandra Smith, who will be providing our suicide prevention workshop. And thank you again, Nadia, because she seems amazing. I'm so excited to learn from her.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to encourage everyone to unmute themselves, say their good nights, say their thank yous, and hope you all have a great rest of your night.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone. You're awesome.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Rose.
Good night.
Bye, Rose. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Have a good night.
You too. Bye, B. Bye, Ida.
Bye, Rosie.
Bye, Rosie. Yes.
Thank you, Ida. Great job, Ida.
Thank you.
Yes.
I was so
Bye-bye. Good
nervous,
night.
man.
Hi, Rosie.
Thank you, everybody.
Hi.
Apple.
How are you?
Okay.